The jewelry store was silent except for the soft chime of classical music playing in the background. The gleaming glass cases sparkled under the warm lighting, filled with luxury pieces worth thousands. It was the kind of place where people whispered, where elegance and wealth were unspoken rules. And then, a sudden, sharp sound cut through the air. Idiot. Heads turned. A few customers gasped. The employees stiffened. A teenage boy, no older than 14, stood near a case of watches. His face flushed red as he clenched his fists. His body twitched slightly, an involuntary jerk of his shoulder. His mother, standing beside him, whispered something in his ear, her expression tight with worry. The boy muttered an apology under his breath, but before he could turn away, a sharp voice cut through the air. Ugh, could you not do that in here? It was one of the store's employees, a man in his late 30s, dressed in an expensive suit, arms crossed. He looked at the boy with open irritation, his lip curled in distaste. The boy tensed. His mother stepped forward. He has Tourette's, she said, her voice calm but firm. He can't control it. The employee scoffed. Well, maybe this isn't the place for people like him. Silence. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. The boy's hands trembled. His tics grew worse, as they always did when he was stressed. He turned to leave, head hanging low, trying to hold back tears. And then a voice spoke up, calm, steady, but with a weight that made the entire room turn. That's enough. Everyone turned toward the man who had been quietly browsing near the back of the store. Keanu Reeves. The air shifted. The employee's face paled. No one expected what happened next. For a moment, the entire store was frozen. Keanu Reeves stood near the back, casually dressed in a black blazer and jeans. His posture relaxed yet commanding. His dark eyes locked onto the store employee with an expression that wasn't angry, but it was something deeper. Disappointed. The employee swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably. He had been so quick to dismiss the boy, so sure that no one would call him out. But now, a Hollywood icon, a man known for his kindness, was staring straight at him. The boy's mother looked at Keanu, recognition flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. The boy himself was still staring at the floor, breathing unevenly, trying to control his tics. Keanu took a slow step forward, his boots clicking softly against the polished marble floor. You have no idea what he's dealing with, he said, his voice low but carrying through the silent store. And yet you treat him like he's a problem? The employee hesitated, glancing around as if searching for support. But the other customers were watching, some with narrowed eyes, others whispering among themselves. No one was on his side. He was being disruptive, the employee muttered, his confidence slipping. This is an upscale store. We have a certain atmosphere to maintain. Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering the words. Then he did something no one expected. He turned to the boy. Hey, he said gently. Do you like watches? The boy hesitated. His hands were still trembling slightly, but he glanced up confused. Keanu gave him a small smile. I love watches, he continued. They're like little machines you can wear on your wrist. Tiny pieces working together, perfectly in sync. The boy blinked, as if trying to process why this famous actor was talking to him. Keanu pointed at one of the glass cases. That one's cool. A mechanical movement, no batteries. It just keeps going as long as you wear it. The boy followed his gaze, his eyes widening just a bit. Automatic movement, he murmured. Keanu grinned. Yeah, you know your stuff. The boy nodded, his tics calming slightly as he focused on something he actually cared about. I like how they work, he admitted. The gears, the balance wheel, it's like controlled chaos. Keanu chuckled. That's a great way to put it. For a moment, the tension in the room seemed to ease. But then, the employee scoffed. Are you seriously doing this right now? He snapped, trying to act like some kind of hero. Look, I don't care who you are. This is a business. We don't need disruptions. The boy flinched. His mother's eyes darkened. Keanu slowly turned back to the employee. And this time his expression wasn't just disappointed. It was sharp. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. The employee hesitated. Jason." Keanu nodded slowly. "All right, Jason." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. A sleek, black card. "Call your manager," he said. "Tell them Keanu Reeves wants to buy a watch." Jason frowned. "What?" Keanu's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "You said this is a business, right? Then let's do business." Jason hesitated, then muttered something under his breath before storming toward the back office. The moment he disappeared, the boy turned to Keanu. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. Keanu glanced at him. "Why not?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. I don't want to cause more trouble." Keanu's gaze softened. "You're not causing trouble," he said. "He is." The boy's mother finally spoke. "I appreciate what you're doing," she said carefully. "But why?" Keanu shrugged. "Because I've been where he is." The mother frowned. "What do you mean?" Keanu hesitated for the first time. Then he sighed. "When I was younger," he said, "I had trouble fitting in. I moved around a lot, didn't always know how to connect with people. And I had a friend, someone who had tics, like your son." The boy's eyes widened slightly. Keanu smiled faintly. "People treated him differently, but he was one of the best people I knew." The mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed her son's shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. Keanu just nodded. But before anyone could say more, Jason returned, and this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, a sharply dressed man in his 50s walked with purpose, his face unreadable. The store manager. Keanu straightened slightly, his expression calm. "Mr. Reeves," the manager said smoothly, his tone polite but guarded. "Jason tells me you're interested in making a purchase?" Keanu nodded. "That's right." The manager glanced at Jason, then at the boy and his mother. His lips pressed into a thin line. "My apologies if there was any misunderstanding," he said carefully. "Our staff is trained to ensure a pleasant shopping experience for all our customers." Keanu's eyes flickered toward Jason, who was now standing stiffly, arms crossed. "I don't think there was a misunderstanding," Keanu said mildly. "I think Jason just doesn't like people who are different from him." Jason bristled. "That's not." The manager held up a hand, silencing him. He turned back to Keanu. "Sir, I'd be happy to assist you personally. What timepiece were you interested in?" Keanu smiled. "Actually, I was thinking about getting something for my new friend here." The boy's eyes widened. "What?" Keanu nodded toward the case. "Pick one." The boy looked at his mother, who seemed equally stunned. I can't." Keanu crouched slightly, so he was at eye level. "Sure you can. Pick the one you like most." The boy hesitated, glancing at the watches. His fingers twitched slightly. Then slowly he pointed at a sleek black timepiece with an intricate skeleton dial. Keanu nodded. "Good choice." The manager smiled tightly. "An excellent selection. That piece is valued at." Keanu pulled out his wallet. "I'll take it." Jason scoffed. "Are you serious? You're just buying a kid a..." Keanu looked at him. "Yes, I am." Jason opened his mouth, then closed it, his face red with frustration. The manager, sensing the shift in power, quickly stepped behind the counter to process the purchase. As the transaction was completed, Keanu handed the bag to the boy. "Here," he said. The boy took it carefully, his hands still shaking. I don't know what to say." Keanu smiled. "You don't have to say anything." For the first time since stepping into the store, the boy smiled, a real, genuine smile. But just as the moment seemed to settle, the manager cleared his throat. "Jason," he said coldly, "we'll be having a conversation about this later." Jason's face paled. Keanu turned to him one last time. Next time, he said, try treating people with kindness first. It's free. With that, he turned back to the boy and his mother. Enjoy the watch, he said with a grin. And then, as casually as he had arrived, Keanu Reeves walked out of the store. The boy looked down at the bag in his hands, then back at the door where Keanu had just disappeared. He never expected a simple shopping trip to change his life. But something told him this was just the beginning. The jewelry store was silent, but the tension in the air was unbearable. The boy, Jake, stood frozen, his cheeks flushed red from both humiliation and anger. The employee who had mocked his Tourette stood behind the glass counter, arms crossed, a smirk still playing on his lips. Keanu Reeves, standing just a few feet away, had already made it clear that he wouldn't tolerate disrespect. But something about his expression now hinted that he wasn't done yet. The customers who had initially ignored the scene were now fully invested, their eyes darting between the actor and the employee, sensing that something bigger was about to unfold. And then, Keanu did something that no one expected. He took a deep breath, walked past the employee, and crouched down at Jake's level. His eyes softened, filled with warmth and understanding. "Hey, kid," Keanu said gently. "I have a question for you." Jake hesitated. He was still trying to hold back the tics that threatened to break through his body, a battle he was so used to fighting in public. But something about Keanu's tone made him feel safe. "Oh, okay," Jake stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu smiled. "If you could have anything in this store, anything at all, what would it be?" Jake blinked confused. What do you mean?" Keanu glanced up at the glass cases filled with expensive watches, necklaces, and rings. "I mean, if you had to pick one thing, what would you want?" Jake hesitated again, stealing a glance at his mother, who looked just as confused as he did. She gave him a slight nod, as if to say, "Asterisk, it's okay. Answer him, asterisk." Jake turned back and swallowed. I like that necklace," he admitted, pointing to a simple silver chain behind the glass. But it's too expensive." The employee scoffed. "Yeah, no kidding." The smirk hadn't left his face, but this time, Keanu didn't even look at him. Instead, he stood up, walked to the counter, and tapped the glass directly over the necklace. "I'll take this one," he said. The employee's smirk faltered. "Wait, what?" Keanu reached into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet, retrieving his credit card. "You heard me. I'll buy the necklace." The store was dead silent. The customers who had been watching began whispering amongst themselves. The employee cleared his throat. "Look, Mr. Reeves, that's really not necessary." Keanu cut him off. "Oh, it is. And not just because Jake deserves it, but because I want to see something." Jake's eyes widened as Keanu handed the necklace to him. His hand shook as he took it, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. "But why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu knelt down again, looking Jake directly in the eyes. "Because I know what it's like to feel different," he said, his voice laced with something deeper, something raw. "And I know what it's like when people don't understand you." For a moment, Jake could only stare at him. "Keanu Reeves understands me?" The weight of those words sank into his chest, and for the first time that day, he felt something other than embarrassment. He felt seen. The store remained silent until the employee, still trying to regain some control of the situation, forced out a laugh. "All right, well, that was a nice little moment, but we should really get back to." Keanu stood up, his demeanor shifting instantly. The softness in his eyes vanished, replaced by something firm and unwavering. "No," he said. "We're not done here." The employee blinked. "Excuse me?" Keanu crossed his arms. "You disrespected this kid. You mocked him. And you thought you could get away with it because he was just some customer, just some kid with tics." His voice was sharp now, cutting through the air like a blade. The employee's face paled, but he forced another laugh. "Oh, come on, I was just joking around." Keanu's jaw clenched. A joke is something that makes people laugh with you, not something that makes them feel ashamed of who they are. The store manager, who had been watching in stunned silence, finally stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Reeves, I sincerely apologize for my employee's behavior. This is not how we treat our customers." Keanu turned to him. "Then prove it." The manager blinked. "Excuse me?" Keanu gestured toward Jake. "You want to show that this isn't what your store stands for? Then do something about it." The manager shifted uncomfortably, looking between Keanu, Jake, and the now visibly nervous employee. The weight of the situation had shifted. This wasn't just about an insult anymore. This was about accountability. After a long pause, the manager sighed. "You're right." He turned to the employee. "You're dismissed for the rest of the day. We'll have a discussion about this later." The employee's jaw dropped. "Wah! Are you serious?" The manager nodded. "Very." The employee sputtered, but under Keanu's piercing gaze, he seemed to realize there was no winning this argument. He let out a frustrated breath, grabbed his things, and stormed toward the exit. The store was silent as the door swung shut behind him. Keanu finally turned back to Jake and his mother, his expression softening once again. "You okay?" Jake nodded slowly, still in shock. "Yeah." Keanu smiled. "Good. And that necklace? Wear it with pride, okay?" Jake looked down at the silver chain in his hands. It was more than just jewelry now. It was proof that someone like Keanu Reeves had stood up for him. His mother wiped her eyes, clearly overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to do this." Keanu shook his head. "I did have to, because no one deserves to be treated like that." Jake looked up at him, a new sense of confidence sparking in his eyes. You're really cool," he said, a shy smile creeping onto his face. Keanu grinned. "You know what, kid? So are you." For the first time since the incident started, Jake laughed. It wasn't forced. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was real. The other customers, who had been watching the entire event unfold, began to clap. The sound started slow, but quickly grew louder until the entire store was applauding. Keanu, ever humble, simply gave Jake a small nod and turned to leave. But just before he stepped out, Jake called after him. "Hey, Keanu." Keanu paused, glancing back. "Yeah." Jake swallowed hard, his tics momentarily still. "Can I be like you when I grow up?" Keanu's smile widened. "You already are." And with that, he walked out of the store, leaving behind not just a stunned crowd, but a boy whose life had just changed forever. Jake held the necklace in his hands, his fingers tracing the smooth silver chain. The store had mostly returned to normal, though a strange energy lingered, like the echoes of something unforgettable. Keanu Reeves was gone, but his words stayed with Jake, looping in his mind like a song he couldn't turn off. Asterisk, you already are. Asterisk. The word sent a rush of warmth through his chest, but deep down, a small part of him still felt incomplete. He had been bullied his entire life. People mocked his tics, laughed when he couldn't control them, whispered behind his back as if he couldn't hear. But today had been different. Today, someone had stood up for him. Not just anyone Keanu Reeves. And yet, the words of the employee still echoed in his mind, taunting him. Asterisk, do you need me to repeat that, or are you just going to twitch again? Asterisk, the smirk, the condescending laugh, the way everyone in the store had gone silent, as if waiting to see if he'd just take it, if he'd be the quiet, nervous kid he always was. Even though the employee had been forced to leave, Jake felt an unfamiliar tension in his chest. He wasn't afraid. He was angry. Meanwhile, outside the store, the dismissed employee, Chris, paced furiously on the sidewalk, his hands balled into fists. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath. Freaking unbelievable. One moment, he had been in control. Just another day at work, pushing some annoying kids' buttons, and the next, he was humiliated in front of Keanu Reeves. Keanu. Freaking. Reeves. Chris clenched his teeth. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. Who even was that kid? And why had Keanu made such a big deal about it? It's not like he hurt him. It was just a joke. People needed to stop being so damn sensitive. He exhaled sharply, glancing through the store window. His manager was still talking to some customers, but the kid, he was still there. Chris sneered. Something inside him snapped, and before he could stop himself, he stormed back toward the store. Back inside the store, ***, Jake was lost in thought when the sound of the store's front door slamming open made everyone jump. He turned just in time to see Chris, red-faced, fuming, storming back inside. The manager immediately stepped forward. "What the hell are you doing back here?" Chris ignored him. His eyes locked onto Jake. "You think you're special now, huh?" His voice was low, dangerous. Jake stiffened. He could feel his tics acting up, his fingers twitching involuntarily. His mother grabbed his arm protectively, her face paling. The other customers started backing away. The manager's voice was sharp. "Chris, you need to leave. Right now." Chris didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on Jake. "You think just because Keanu Reeves bought you a necklace, you're some kind of celebrity now?" His lips curled. "Newsflash, kid, he's gone. And guess what? Tomorrow, no one's going to care." Jake's breath caught in his throat. The familiar feeling of helplessness started creeping in. The same feeling he had every time a classmate whispered about him. Every time a stranger looked at him like he was broken. Every time someone laughed at something he couldn't control. And then, something changed. Jake's fingers closed around the necklace. He took a step forward. The room seemed to freeze. Even Chris hesitated, caught off guard by the shift. For the first time in his life, Jake wasn't backing down. "You're right," Jake said, his voice steady. "Keanu's gone." Chris smirked. "See? Even you. But I'm still here." Chris blinked. Jake swallowed, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. "You've been making fun of people like me my whole life. Maybe you think it's funny. Maybe you think it makes you better than me." He let out a shaky breath. "But you know what I think." Chris narrowed his eyes. "I think you're a coward." A stunned silence fell over the store. Chris's face twitched. "Excuse me? You heard me." Jake's voice grew stronger. "You're a coward. You pick on people you think won't fight back. You say things you think no one will call you out on. But today, you lost." Chris's jaw clenched. "You lost to me," Jake said, his voice unwavering. Chris opened his mouth, ready to snap back, but something in Jake's eyes made him hesitate. Jake wasn't scared anymore, and that terrified him. The manager finally broke the silence. "Chris, if you don't leave this store right now, I will personally make sure you never work in the city again." Chris's eyes darted around the store. Every single customer was staring at him. Not with fear, not with sympathy, but with disappointment. He had lost. Without another word, Chris turned on his heel and stormed out of the store. The second the door slammed shut, a wave of relief washed over everyone. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His mother squeezed his shoulder, her eyes glistening with pride. A customer, an older man standing near the counter, gave Jake a nod. "That," he said, "was the bravest thing I've ever seen." The store manager smiled. "Kid, if you ever need a job in the future, you come see me." Jake's lips parted slightly in shock. "Really?" The manager chuckled. "Really?" Jake glanced down at the necklace in his hand. He wasn't just holding silver and metal. He was holding proof. Proof that he could stand up for himself. Proof that he didn't need Keanu Reeves to fight his battles, because now he could fight them himself. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt free. Jake sat in the car, the weight of the necklace still warm in his hands. His mother hadn't started the engine yet. Instead, she turned toward him, her eyes shining with something deeper than just pride. "That was incredible, Jake." Her voice was thick with emotion. Jake swallowed. He wasn't used to feeling like this, strong, respected. For once, He wasn't the kid everyone pitied. For once, he was just him. The day had started like any other. Just another outing. Another chance for people to remind him he was different. But now, everything felt different in a way he couldn't quite describe. His mother finally started the car, pulling out of the parking lot. But just as they turned onto the main road, Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. Hello. A familiar, deep voice filled his ear. Hey, kid. It's Keanu. Jake nearly dropped the phone. His mother glanced over. Everything okay? Jake's brain scrambled to function. Why, yeah. Hold on. He fumbled, putting the call on speaker. Keanu's voice was calm, warm. Just wanted to check in on you. That was pretty brave. What you did back there. Jake could barely process what was happening. Keanu Reeves was calling him. Thank you, Jake stammered. Keanu chuckled. You earned it. He paused for a moment before adding, You remind me a little of myself when I was younger. Jake blinked. I do. Yeah, Keanu said. People didn't always believe in me either. But you know what? The ones who matter, they see you. And today, a lot of people saw you. Jake's mother squeezed his arm. Keanu continued. I know it probably feels like just another day. But trust me, kid, this story's not over yet. Jake's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Keanu hesitated, as if deciding whether to say what came next. Then he simply said, Check your phone in an hour. And with that, the line went dead. Jake stared at the screen, his heart hammering. What just happened? An hour later, Jake and his mother had barely walked through the front door when his phone started vibrating again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a flood of notifications. Confused, Jake opened his messages. Then his jaw dropped. His social media was exploding. Hashtag Keanu Reeves was trending worldwide. But more shocking than that, so was hashtag Jake Strong. Hundreds, no, thousands of posts flooded the internet. Someone had filmed the entire moment in the jewelry store. Keanu standing up for him. The way the room had shifted. The way Jake himself had stood up to Chris. And now, the world was watching. One comment stood out among the flood of notifications. I don't know who Jake is, but this kid is my new hero. Jake's breath hitched. His hands shook as he scrolled through the comments. Messages of support, admiration, encouragement. People sharing their own stories of being bullied, mocked, underestimated. People who saw themselves in him. His mother gasped. Jake, look at this. She turned her phone around, showing him a post from none other than Keanu Reeves. It was a simple black and white image of Jake standing in the jewelry store, his shoulders squared, facing Chris. The caption, Bravery isn't about fighting back. It's about standing tall. Hashtag Jake Strong. Jake's chest tightened. This wasn't just a moment. It was a movement. The unexpected call. Over the next few days, the story kept spreading. News outlets picked it up. Interviews were requested. Celebrities retweeted Keanu's posts, calling Jake an inspiration. But nothing could have prepared him for what came next. 3 days after the incident, Jake's phone rang again. This time, it was a number he recognized. It was from a major film studio. He hesitated before answering. Hello. A professional-sounding voice responded. Hi, Jake. My name is Daniel Carter, and I work with Warner Brothers. We saw your story, and we'd love to talk to you about a special project. Jake's mind blanked. A project? Daniel chuckled. Keanu Reeves recommended you personally. Jake nearly dropped the phone. I don't understand. Daniel continued. We're working on a documentary about resilience, strength, and standing up for what's right. And we'd love for you to be part of it. Jake felt his entire world tilt. Him, the kid who had spent most of his life being laughed at. The kid who had always been the outsider. The kid who had never expected to be seen. Now the world wasn't just seeing him. They were listening. 1 year later, the documentary, Jake Strong, More Than a Label, premiered worldwide. It wasn't just about Jake. It was about everyone who had ever felt small, ignored, unimportant. It was about strength, about courage, about knowing your worth even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. And sitting in the front row of the premiere, dressed in a sleek black suit, Jake glanced over at the man who had started it all. Keanu Reeves gave him a knowing smile. "You ready for this?" Keanu asked. Jake took a deep breath. The cameras flashed. The world watched. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt unstoppable. The end. Fire final thoughts and CTA. This isn't just a story about Jake. It's a story about every person who has ever been underestimated. If this happened to you, would you have stood up like Jake did? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe that one moment of kindness can change a life, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories. Because sometimes the right person stands up at the right moment, and the whole world takes notice.